So here we are again, and here's another version of covering up to go out in public that I do use. This is actually the mask I leave in my car because just about everywhere you go now you have to have a mask on before you can go into stores or do any kind of business in a bank or anything like that, if you can even get into a bank. Some of the banks I've gone to will only let you do drive-through stuff. So, sometimes you can go in, sometimes you can't. So, is there any proof that they work? Well, actually, my daughter took her little boy to the pediatrician the other day, and there was kind of an interesting poster on the door, which she got a picture of. Now, this picture is not really great because it's kind of glary. It's plastic, or covered in a plastic sleeve, so it's kind of hard to read. But I'm going to take off my mask because I keep fogging up my dadgum glasses, and that way maybe I can read this thing. So if you look on the right, it shows, I'm sorry, on the left, you have a COVID-19 carrier, right? And on the right, you have a person who's healthy. So in the first case, you've got a healthy person who's wearing a mask. The person with COVID, who's the carrier, is not wearing a mask. And the probability that you can transmit the disease or you can have the disease transmitted to you even though you're wearing a mask, is about 70%. Now, why would that be the case? Well, if you've got a mask on, that mask is not protecting you from the other person, it's protecting the other person from you. So that's why all this mess about wearing masks is so important. If you notice down at the next one, it says the healthy person doesn't have a mask, but the COVID-19 carrier does. And the probability that that person could then transmit is down to 5%. And the reason is because whenever we speak, we cough, we exhale with our mouths open, we're letting out moisture particles that can carry those virus particles. And so if there's somebody who, up in the top picture, has COVID and is breathing and walking around the room or walking around a store or whatever, and those particles are hitting your mask. Let's think about what happens to your mask when you take it off with your hands, right? Then you've got those viral particles on your hands, and if you're not thinking about it, you could accidentally then infect yourself. So for the most part, the moisture that you're going to be exhaling is going to get trapped on the surface of that mask that you are wearing. And that's why it's important, even if you don't have it, for you to be wearing masks around other people because you don't know whether they have it or not. And so then the bottom one, you notice you've got a COVID carrier. Both of you are wearing masks. The healthy person's wearing a mask. The COVID carrier's wearing a mask. And the transmission probability is down to 1.5%, which means if there were 100 people walking around with masks on and they all had COVID and you didn't, your chances of getting it would still only be 1.5%. So that's pretty interesting the way that all plays out. So now, today, what we're going to be working on is some additional information based on the vocabulary that you were introduced to yesterday with the flocabulary song and the handouts that you had. Today what you're going to be doing is you're going to be looking at these additional handouts that you have and looking at the definitions of these 10 different terms that you need to know. And then, as it says, on the first one, so let's look at the first one, the word analyze. So the word analyze, they give you a definition here: to study or carefully or in detail. And then it says Karamo broke the company's budget down into different parts so that he could analyze it and tell where they were overspending. So a synonym for analyze would be to examine or to break down. Now, we use analysis, or we analyze data in science when we do scientific experiments. We gather data. It's just like the data that's on this sign about the transmission possibilities if somebody's wearing a mask, not wearing a mask, infected, not infected. So the first word that you're asked to work with is the word analyze. And if you'll notice in the box below the picture of the guy with his striped socks and the definition of analyze, It says use this word in a sentence or give an example to show that you understand its meaning. So you don't necessarily have to write a sentence, but you do have to let me know that you understand what the word analyze means. And then it says you can draw the vocabulary word or an example of it. So, you know, if you were going to draw an analysis picture, you could do something like, you know, drawing a bar graph or drawing a pie graph or something like that to show that you have broken something down to examine it, or any number of other things, I'm sure. I mean, you guys listen to Sports Central, right? When you listen to sports statistics. Those are always an example of analysis as well. So maybe you could come up with an example from that. The next word is conclusion, and the definition they give you is a judgment that you form after considering all the evidence. And we do that in science all the time as well. We come to conclusions at the end of a lab report, at the end of an activity, and we decide whether what we were testing worked or not. After the sentence that's given is after carefully analyzing all of the evidence, the judge came to a conclusion about what happened. A synonym here is a judgment. It could also be a decision as to what you think. You decide based on the evidence what you believe happened or maybe didn't happen. Again, it says to use this word in a sentence or give an example to show that you understand its meaning. And then again, it says you could also draw the vocabulary word or an example of it. The third word is control, top of the second page. To incorporate a parallel experiment as a standard of comparison in a scientific study. So a control can be a verb or it can be a noun. You can control certain variables in the experiment, or you can set up a control for the experiment. So let's say that you were testing whether some fertilizer was effective or not. You would have a plant as your control that you gave no fertilizer to, and then you would test maybe various types of fertilizer on similar plants, on plants that were the same size, the same type, started at the same time, grown from the same seeds, whatever. But you would be controlling all of those variables, controlling all those different things, those different factors, so that you would be able to test the one factor, which is maybe the fertilizer, the different kinds of fertilizers. So it says to use this word in a sentence or to give an example to show that you understand its meaning, or once again to draw the vocabulary word or an example of it. So I'm going to be looking through these. These are going to be graded, so don't just, blow this off. I mean, this is a fairly straightforward, gives you lots of choices kind of assignment. And again, we're trying to get to the gold, right? We want to get to the end by Friday. The next word on this page is double blind. And the definition for double blind means it's relating to a scientific experiment in which neither the experimenter nor the subjects know which group is the test group and which group is the control group. So a double blind means you're testing something, you've got two different groups, but you don't know which group is getting the testing material, whatever's being tested, and you don't know which group is getting what they call the placebo, which means they're not being tested. So sometimes they use this kind of testing on new medications. They'll have two groups of people who are suffering from some kind of disease and or some kind of condition, and they'll give some of them, half of them, the placebo, which means they're basically getting a sugar pill, and then the other group is getting the actual medication, and they're testing it to see how effective it is. So again, we want to, there's a sentence there. Well, I read that one, and it says, in the double-blind experiment, neither the experimenter nor the subjects knew which group was the control group. So notice that these sentences are using terms. Each time you get a new sentence, it's using a term that's already been defined. So make sure you're paying attention to that as well. Again, it says use the word in a sentence or give an example to show that you understand its meaning. You can also draw the vocabulary word or an example of it. So you could put like maybe 2 pill bottles, and one pill bottle would say placebo, and underneath that it could say, or it could say sugar pill, and then on the other one it could say test drug or whatever, test medicine on it. The next word, the top of the next page, experiment. That's a test or a procedure that's done for the purpose of learning or proving something. And then it says scientists performed an experiment to study the effects of daily exercise on dogs. Again, you're supposed to use this word in a sentence or show that you know its meaning by giving me maybe a different definition or an example of an experiment. And then it says again to draw it or draw an example of it. Hypothesis. This is an idea that's based on some evidence but hasn't been proven yet. Scientists have a new hypothesis about how sugar affects behavior, and they are testing it in a lab to see if their prediction is correct. Okay. So again, we want to use the word hypothesis in a sentence or give an example of a hypothesis to let me know that you understand what hypothesis means. You can again draw the word hypothesis if you can figure out a way to draw it, or provide an example of it. The next one, method. A method is a way of doing something. So it says Solly has his own particular method for studying for an exam, which includes putting flashcards on his forehead. Okay, well, whatever. Synonyms means, other words that mean the same thing would be a way of doing something, a system of doing something, a manner in which you do something. In this particular section, what we're studying is the scientific method, which has a series of steps that are basically the same from experiment to experiment to experiment, or study or research project, whatever you want to call it. You follow the same set of activities, or you follow the same line of thought, which is called the scientific method. So once again, you want to use the word in a sentence or give me an example, draw the vocabulary word, or give me an example of it. The next word is observe, which means to see or watch closely. Synonyms would mean to watch or to view. Antonyms, which means the opposite, would be to ignore something or to miss it completely. And in this case, it says I wore binoculars so that I could observe the birds on my nature walk. Again, use the word in a sentence or give an example or diagram it. Placebo. This is something that we used. I talked a couple of minutes ago about how they use placebos when in a double-blind experiment, meaning that some people are getting a test medication and other people are not, and no one knows which is which because the pills will all look the same. It says the definition is an inactive substance used in a controlled experiment to test the effects of an active substance, so in other words, a medication. And here's the sentence. In the study, one group was given a headache medicine and the other was given a placebo. So in other words, something that was not designed to help with their headaches. The next word, support. Support means to give evidence. The facts support Maurice's claim, so I believe he is telling the truth. A synonym means to back it up, in other words, to give evidence. And an antonym means to contradict, which means that would be something that would be the opposite of good evidence. It would be bad evidence, right? So again, we want to use the word in a sentence, give an example to show that you understand it, draw a vocabulary word, or an example, provide an example. So this is something to help you reinforce again some writing, help you to reinforce these terms that you were given yesterday. Tomorrow we'll do one more activity, and then on Friday there will be a quiz. So you want to be ready for that quiz when it comes up on Friday. So take care, have a good rest of your day, and I look forward to talking with you again on Friday. And remember, you'll probably find lots of people in masks one of these days soon. Take care. Bye-bye.